not sure I convince anyone right now that I'm an athlete, but this is a big rehab milestone because I'm supposed to be on crutches right now, so it's a few risky behaviors to be with you. As Risa said, Jen Goldsack, CEO of the Digital Medicine Society, or DiMe, and a bit of a challenge to cover digital health and medicine from inception to impact in 8 or 9 minutes, but we'll see what we can do. I'm going to take an approach of telling a few stories, but before I do, let me just tell you a little bit about DiMe. For folks who don't know us, we are a global nonprofit. Our mission is to advance the ethical, effective, equitable, and safe use of digital technologies to redefine healthcare and improve lives. Importantly, we are tech enthusiasts, not tech determinists. Our goal is not to try and shoehorn digital technologies into every nook and cranny in healthcare, but rather what we are trying to do is think about how can these new digital tools in the toolbox really improve and address some of the most pressing and persistent challenges that we experience in healthcare. So let's dive in with some of these examples. I want to take you back in time. I think we can officially call this the before times. October 2019, our organization launched a crowdsourced library of digital endpoints that were actively being used to answer questions about the safety and efficacy of new medical products. In October 2019, we found that there were 12 sponsors who were using 34 digital endpoints, and that nearly half of those were positioned in phase 2 and phase 3 when it was a drug or a biologic, and that nearly a third or nearly half of those were positioned as primary endpoints. We thought this was incredibly exciting. We thought, well, gosh, this isn't, the stuff of the future. This is here now. We got so excited. We wrote a Stat News op-ed about the whole thing. But where are we now? So we maintain this, we update this library every quarter, and when we look today, we see that 104 sponsors have collected endpoints. We can see that nearly, or just over 2/3 of them are being used in phase 2 and phase 3. We can see that 1/3 of the 378 unique endpoints are positioned as primary endpoints. This is absolutely extraordinary data, and so we can look at not only the increase in the number of different endpoints, but we can also look at the adoption, the enormous embrace by industry of these measures over the last 3 years or so. But I want to come back to this idea of, what was it? Let me see if I can figure out how to go back really quickly. Yes, 378 unique endpoints. I'm going to go ahead and make the case that there aren't 378 interesting things to measure about an individual's health. And what you'll actually see if you go into the endpoints library is that there are over 80 unique measures of physical activity, over 50 unique measures of sleep. And there's a point at which we need to think about harmonization, and we need to think about what's the best measure for determining someone's health or disease or status and their condition, as opposed to what's the Me Too product that I could put onto the market. I think this is really, really important, and we need to make sure that we are not just moving forward with volume, but we are moving forward with intent. And when we think about this, it's not just the measures. I'd argue that while the ability to capture data around someone's experience of their disease, both in and out of the clinic, is an absolutely enormous trait of the digitization of healthcare, we have to think about the broader landscape. We have to think about the use of all the digital tools in the toolbox, and we have to think about them working together to return outsized impact across the entire drug development continuum. If all we're doing is shoehorning remote patient monitoring into clinical trials as they exist today, all we're doing is adding inefficiencies. We need to fundamentally reimagine how we develop new medical products. I think this is absolutely critical. And the second story I want to tell, and I'm really conscious that I'm standing really still, so I apologize. The second piece I want to mention is the sort of the corollary, if you like. Someone just threw my crutches, I literally heard it. Is the corollary on the healthcare delivery side of the house. So here's a table that, or a figure that many of you might have seen vis-a-vis the use of remote patient monitoring in healthcare delivery. So for folks who are not from the US, CPT codes are the way that we bill for healthcare. So if you look at the different billing that goes in, that's a really nice proxy measure for what kind of care is being delivered. And when you look at this nice exponential curve, this looks tremendous, and there's nearly a 2,000% growth in RPM in 2 years. There's two things that are important. One, that's between 2019 and 2021, and I'd argue there was a pretty big exogenous shock that happened during that time that makes that data, you know, perhaps not representative of current state in healthcare. The other thing is there's no scale on the y-axis. So this is a classic case of lies, and damn statistics, right? So remote patient monitoring went from infinitesimally small to just a very little bit of it, despite the enormous increase. And it's really interesting to think about that now. In an era where we are trying to do as much as we can on the healthcare side of the house to generate revenue, the fact that there are 4 CPT codes that providers can use in order to bill for remote patient monitoring, and it's barely being used, tells you something pretty damning about the state of the tools and technologies. Now remember, I come from an organization called the Digital Medicine Society. I really believe in these tools to improve the way that we care for people. But I think there's a couple of things that are fundamentally wrong about how we are developing these products and introducing them into care today. In terms of how we develop the products, at DiMe we spend an awful lot of time creating evidentiary frameworks around the integrity of these products and the claim that they make. Actually today, which is the reason I put a project slide up, we are launching a new product to take our V3 framework, which is the broadly adopted gold standard for evaluating digital measurement products, and adding considerations around usability, human factors, and human-centered design. We aren't great at making products that are either great for the end user, great for the clinician and their clinical workflow, or great for the people trying to use the data. And we have to address it if these things are going to go to scale. Then similarly to what we see on the medical product development side of the house, we're pretty lousy at integrating these individual point solutions into a broader tapestry of digitized healthcare. We aren't really thinking about how we actually build and create a reimagined system of care rather than just putting extra tools, extra burden into the existing system that can barely bear any further burden whatsoever. So here's an interesting resource. So we've had a partnership with our colleagues at VA for nearly 3 years now, and last year we put out a playbook on digital healthcare. So bear in mind that our colleagues at VA pay for healthcare a little bit differently, but that actually affords us an opportunity to really think about what does it mean to build healthcare around the person, the patient, and not the clinic. And similarly, and you're going to notice, and not by accident, that the next slide mirrors, if you like, a little bit of what we were reviewing in the life sciences. We have to think about deploying all of the tools in the toolbox in a really synergistic and integrated way, not just to solve an individual solution at an individual point at time, but we have to think about all the different functional applications and the different ROIs that these tools, when combined, when done so intentionally, can bring to a reimagined way of caring for people. Currently in healthcare, we sit in the clinic waiting for people to arrive sick on our doorstep. Then we think good healthcare is how good are we at sorting out that mess, when that person might be more advanced than they could have been, when they might be more expensive, complex, and when the health inequities that we know exist within our community are fully exacerbated. So I think I did it. Yes, 35 seconds. This is what I'll leave you with. When we think about the promise of digitized healthcare and across the entire continuum, we don't think of a world where there's a silo of research over here, there's a silo of medical product development here, there's individual health promotion, and there's healthcare delivery. We think about a very different future where all of these things are fully integrated, powered by flows of data. And we imagine a future healthcare system that's defined by an individual's health and not by how good we are at treating their illnesses. So with that, I'm going to slowly, I think, hobble off, and happy to grab any questions during the break if that helps. Thanks, everyone. I might need my crutches.
Yeah, you want the crutches?
I do.
Okay. Crutches. Sure.
Also, I'm going to take my crutches because I overcooked my goose, and you don't want to see me wipe out. Thank you.
And, tell us, as I've heard you talk about advice to startups as well,
yep.
Right? And so this idea of not the race to regulatory, but there's like several things we should be thinking about all at
yep.
once.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And so we've just completed a body of work at DiMe, actually in partnership with our colleagues at FDA, to really try and define the different regulatory pathways for medical products here in the US. What we're starting to find, and the messaging that we're trying to promote right now, is that regulatory strategy is absolutely critical to good business strategy. If all you're doing is trying to do gymnastics to avoid regulatory oversight by FDA, there's a very good chance that the full intended use of your product, the full population of individuals who could benefit from your innovation, and quite importantly, the different income streams, the different reimbursement pathways, you are cutting those off if you aren't actively thinking about regulatory strategy as core to good business strategy. And when you do that, it drives you towards thinking about the opportunity to have an integrated evidence plan. When you aren't just thinking about what's the dossier that we need to hand off to our FDA colleagues, but what's the evidence that we're going to need for those downstream decision makers? What are payers going to ask for? And how can we think about an integrated evidence plan where we're capturing data as efficiently and effectively as possible? How are we thinking about the information that prescribing clinicians are going to need? Pharmacists, as they coach individuals around the use of these tools, how are we thinking about, in the era of mis and disinformation, having really robust evidence to actually, make patients feel confident in this? So we really do think about regulatory strategy as being core to good business strategy, and that catalyzes a very different mindset around what good evidence generation looks like.
Fantastic. Okay, thanks everyone.